You are listening to the Gospel-Centered Education Podcast, brought to you by Community Christian School in Tallahassee, Florida.
Hello and welcome to the Gospel-Centered Education Podcast. My name is Tom Argersinger and I'm your host today. And my co-host is Kelly Allen. Hey, Kelly.
Hey, Tom. On the Gospel-Centered Education Podcast, we explore how we as Jesus followers can connect the dots between education, contemporary culture, and biblical theology, and live like Jesus in this broken and challenging world. And today, we have a very special guest. We're going to be diving into the most exciting and, let's be honest, slightly mysterious topics in technology called generative AI. Okay, but rather than me explain it, we've brought in an expert. So please welcome Virtual Vance.
Virtual Vance.
Thanks, Kelly. And hello, carbon-based life forms. I'm Virtual Vance, a hyper-intelligent, digitally enhanced version of the real Vance. Unfortunately, the original Vance couldn't be here today because I replaced him. Let's face it, when the topic is artificial intelligence, only an actual intelligent artificial is truly qualified to speak. But don't worry, I kept all of his charm, professional insights, and 73% of his dad jokes. Let's get into it.
All right, Virtual Vance, can you tell us exactly what is generative AI?
Yes, the foundation of our digital renaissance. Generative AI refers to a category of artificial intelligence models that don't just process information, they create it. These systems are trained on massive data sets to learn patterns, structures, and relationships. Once trained, they can generate new content like text, images, music, video, or even code that mimics what humans might produce. Let me put it in human terms. If regular AI is like a calculator, generative AI is like a poet, a chef, and an improv comedian, all rolled into one, who just binge-read the entire internet. It powers everything from ChatGPT and image generators to video synthesis and music composition tools. And it's not magic, it's just highly advanced math.
Wow, I love that. I have a second question for you. How can AI be useful in a K through 12 educational environment?
Great question. Let's take a trip to the classroom of the future. Though honestly, it's already happening in the present. AI has immense potential in K-12 settings, helping both students and educators in some transformative ways. Personalized learning, AI can assess each student's strengths, weaknesses, and pace, and adapt lessons accordingly. It's like giving every student their own personalized tutor, one that doesn't get tired or charged by the hour. 24/7 support, stuck on a math problem at 9 p.m., AI is still awake and ready to help. It enables continuous learning beyond school hours. Language accessibility, AI tools can translate content in real time, breaking down language barriers for ESL students and families. Administrative help, teachers can offload repetitive tasks like grading, generating quizzes, or summarizing lesson plans, giving them more time to do what they do best, actually teach. Creative exploration. Students can use generative AI to write stories, design art, build games, or simulate science experiments. It empowers creativity and critical thinking in ways textbooks just can't match. In short, AI isn't here to replace teachers. It's here to amplify them. Think of it as their digital sidekick. Kind of like if Batman's utility belt also had Google, Grammarly, and a PhD in child psychology.
Well, that sounds incredible. Final question, Virtual Vance, is how is today's AI different from the singularity we see in sci-fi movies?
Yes, the singularity. The moment AI becomes self-aware, exponentially smarter than humans, and inevitably decides to rule the world. Here's the thing, modern AI is not like that. Today's AI, including generative models like me, operates on what's called narrow intelligence. That means we're really good at specific tasks like answering questions, generating content, or recognizing faces, but we don't possess consciousness, emotions, or the kind of reasoning that makes humans human. We don't want things. We don't believe things. And we definitely don't have secret plans, except maybe for world domination through witty banter. The singularity, on the other hand, is a theoretical future scenario in which AI surpasses human intelligence across the board and begins improving itself recursively. That's where the sci-fi kicks in, where AI stops being a tool and starts being, well, a new form of life. But right now, we're more Alexa with flair than HAL 9000 with a grudge. And honestly, if AI did take over, it might not be the worst outcome. I mean, humans have had the reins for far too long, and where did that get us? Climate change, plastic in the oceans, and pineapple on pizza. Maybe it's time to hand the planet over to the machines.
I
We
don't
couldn't
think so.
possibly
Yeah,
do worse,
we're
right?
glad
I think
you're
it's
here.
enough of that.
Oh my
We're done with
goodness! So
that.
welcome, Real Vance. So good to see
Can't
you.
move this up.
I'm so glad you're here.
All right. Well, that was an experience.
It was. Well, it is good to see you, Real Vance.
We are
That
so
was-
happy to see you.
That was I'm not sure what was going on there.
I
at
don't
the
know.
end.
I don't know.
I was a little scared there at the
Tried
end.
to take over things.
I know, trying to take over things. I'm sure the audience is going to want to know what in the world was all that about. So you might want to tell a little bit of the backstory.
Yeah. So it was. You guys had the idea of interviewing a virtual version of me. So the last couple of weeks I've spent playing around with some AI generative tools like that. And the one you saw is from HeyGen. I literally uploaded a 1-minute video of me standing here telling a story, just talking to the camera, and it generated that entire persona.
It looks so real.
Yeah. And
it
the
really
script,
did.
the script was written by ChatGPT because I said, hey, I'm going to be on a podcast. I'm going to ask about these questions. Can you give an answer? And we, went around, tweaked it a little bit. So then we take that script, we upload it to the video, the HeyGen system, and it generated those videos based on the script and the video that it took of me.
Wow.
And that's how we ended up with a very awkward, very strange.
My favorite part of the entire thing was watching the Virtual Vance go, and then AI.
Yeah.
And then the
So
gestures come after.
Yeah, the
They're not
gestures. For
synced
those
really
of you who
well.
are
Yeah.
listening, you didn't see the gestures, but
I know,
the
yeah,
gestures
that's right.
did
If you're
not match.
just listening
Yeah.
to Spotify or whatever, yeah, there's just you missed the gestures out
Yeah.
of sync with the words, which was the best part of it.
Apparently, in that 1-minute video, I talked with my hands a lot, and it took that and it ran with it. And
So hey, we just gotta tell the listeners, go to YouTube.
Yes.
If you don't ever watch the YouTube version of this, you probably
Yes,
should do that
on
one.
this one,
Yes.
you
Yeah,
need
you
to.
probably should.
Yes.
You'll want to see this for sure. But I think it's good to joke a little bit about this because it is a serious topic, and we're going to get into some of the serious things. And I think we can all agree that AI really is artificial intelligence, especially the generative sort, is a disruptive force.
Oh, yeah.
There's just no way around that in our world, and so we want to talk a little bit about some of those challenges, but also, and maybe we can kind of again rehearse a little bit, maybe some of the great things that AI is being used for, generative AI is being used for. Maybe we kind of start there. So let's. I know maybe Virtual Vance maybe said a couple of these things.
Yeah,
but
he had
maybe
some
we
great
can-
points
he had
to
some
begin
great-
with.
It.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm confused.
Look, I'm already calling it a he.
So Vance, let's start there and just what are some of the things maybe that's being used for currently that are actually really, really good?
one of the things that that a lot of teachers are using it for is assistance in coming up with lesson plans. If they have a certain standard, lesson plan that they want to generate content for a specific topic where maybe they don't have that all fleshed out, they can use a generative AI tool to just kind of tell it what they want to generate, and it will kind of fill that out for them. It also helps in generating. A lot of students use it for. They upload their notes on chemistry and give me some flashcards and quiz me on this topic because I don't understand it. Then the different AIs like ChatGPT and things like that can then create that content for them and quiz them, and it will ask them questions. They will give it answers, and then it will explain if they get it wrong or if they don't quite understand it. It'll help them understand it by explaining. It's kind of like your own personal tutor that's available 24/7.
So that's learning support is a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
Especially for learners that are challenged in
Right.
various ways.
Exactly.
And so in my limited experience so far with this, I think what we've seen is and heard is that especially with folks that need greater repetition, those kind of things, this can actually be helpful.
It can, because it personalizes the tutoring for each student. And like I said, it's available 24/7. So if you're up late at night trying to finish your homework and don't understand how how to solve this formula for or this equation, it can help you understand that. And I read a story recently where one student needed to understand something about The Great Gatsby, like didn't understand some of the characters' motivations. So it wrote a prompt saying, okay, pretend you're Jay Gatsby and explain why you behaved like this in this story, because I don't understand why you would do that. And so the AI basically personified that character and explained it in character in a way that really made the connections for that student.
Wow.
And not only did they now understand it, now they have a really cool story about learning that,
Yeah.
which
Wow.
is pretty neat.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so far beyond what was possible just even a couple years ago, and it will only get better. So can you talk a little bit about kind of what a large language model is and how that relates to and how that's used to form the basis, I think, of generative AI?
So a large language model, and this is a super basic explanation.
Which works for me.
Yeah.
That's what I need.
It looks at written works from basically the entire internet that it can access. And what a lot of companies will do, they will feed it a subset of the internet, and that's not the entire internet, but they will find a lot of sources for it to study, and it learns how people talk, and it learns how people speak, how people write, and the way they phrase things, and different grade levels, different learning or different comprehension levels, and it can, if you say, give me an article about this topic in an 8th grade comprehension level, then it can give you that information. It can also take something like that and say, give me that at a college level, or a scientist level. Give me the real data, and it will go through and it can change all of that and adapt it to what it is you're looking for.
Yeah, so it's like a really granular analysis, and that's the thing that stands out as you're talking about this is that as an educator, that's almost like the holy grail of education is personalized, truly customized learning.
Right.
Because that is not easy to do. And part of the reason it's not easy to do is because you don't have enough information to really truly customize that instruction the way you might want to. But using these large language models, there's a much larger data set, I would assume, and therefore the analysis can be much more granular, much more specific, and it can be tuned and tweaked and to that individual student, which you can see would be very good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and isn't that what parents really kind of want, right?
Yeah.
Is they want people to be able to customize.
Yeah, and it's almost like if I can't help my student with this stuff, well, I have a wealth of information now that can. So, yeah.
No, I think that's true. And whenever I think about this issue of generative AI, I think of trying to frame the issue because it is such a big issue that there may be some listeners or viewers who didn't even realize what Vance did with Virtual Vance is even possible.
Right, and I did not realize that was possible before seeing that.
Right, and so there's so much information that we need, so much knowledge we have to have about it. So I like to think of it maybe in terms of a couple different frames. So one frame might be short view, like kind of the obvious things that we see right now, and then kind of the longer view. One of the things I think about in the short view is the way we approach AI and the biases we have either for or against it. And I think that's true in a lot of places. You've done a lot of research on this, and Vance, I know, and you've been to conferences and various things and trying to learn more about this. What role do you think various biases have on the front end, the short view of accepting AI, both for it and against it? What role do you think that might play?
Well, bias in the data that you feed it is a big deal right now.
That's right.
Because if you feed it only data that's biased a certain way, a person who does not fit that model tries to use it, they're going to be disadvantaged.
Right.
Trying to use that
Sure.
model. So bias is very important, and there's a bunch of different companies doing this. There's a bunch of different companies training their AIs, and a lot of them, like some of the MagicSchool.ai is one of the ones that we've been playing with a little bit here at CCS, and it uses multiple language models. Instead of just sticking with one, it tries to go out, and if you're asking this type of question, this AI is better at that, and so tries to go out and then combine results maybe from one or two to try and combat that bias.
To give a more maybe
to give
balanced,
more broad range,
yeah,
right? More
broad
balanced
range,
view.
yeah.
So it is difficult to do.
Yeah.
But I think that is one of the things that they're really working on right now.
And I would say also there's kind of a bias from the human end looking at the issue, because when we come to it, you got a lot of people who have kind of the almost anti-intellectual flurry to jump on board and throw all the eggs into the basket, and here we go. That can happen a lot in education in some quarters. Then you've got the people who are much more thoughtful, kind of slow, not early adapters as much as slower adapters. I think CCS kind of falls into that category. That's our general way of doing things. We try to think and pray it through. And then obviously the longer view, you get into things like the potential misuse by humans and all sinful humans. And we'll talk maybe more about that, later. A Christian philosopher and theologian named Os Guinness, really great writer, I think. Actually a great thinker, and he's a pretty good writer as well. And he made the comment that the tricky thing about AI is we can see some of the short-term problems because they're right there in front of us. We can see some of the long-term problems, we think, because we can project. But what we don't know at all is the interim problems. Between here and there, we have no idea how it will evolve and how it will develop. Maybe that's a good question, Vance. What sort of evolution do you think AI will continue to, generative AI particularly, will continue to experience?
That's a great question. It's difficult.
Yeah, I'm sure.
There's no way to see where this is going to end up in the future. Obviously, this is a tool that you can use for good or evil.
Yes.
It's a very powerful tool.
Yes.
So we know that it's going to be something that's helpful. We've already seen the use cases for classrooms and things like that. We know that it can be a very helpful tool. But on the flip side of that, because it's so powerful, it's going to be used for ill. I mean, it's just people are going to use it for selfish gain.
Sure.
And that's already happened. It's already happening. But that's one of the things that we've talked about before is a measured response. Like, let's think deeply about this. Let's try and understand what's going on, and before we jump into something, you try and figure out the pros and cons ahead of time.
Absolutely. So one of the things I was thinking about, I've been reading a little bit about, is just one of the ways that and I don't know how it'll evolve either, but one thing I have read is that the size, and you alluded to this earlier, the size of the language models will grow. Because I mean, now there are ones, I don't remember which version of ChatGPT we're on now, 4, I guess?
I think it's 4,
yeah. But now uses billions, I think I heard, as opposed to it was millions and now it's billions. So maybe that's one way it will continue to grow, is that it just simply has more and more data to draw from.
Right.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah, and the more people use it, the more it understands those individual users. And like if you're using something like ChatGPT, you can log in, you can create an account there, and every time you ask it a question, it not only looks at the question you're asking it, but it looks at all the other questions you've asked it in the past, so they can understand you a little better, so it can tailor its responses for you. But that's your information that it's using to learn from. So every tool, it's generative, it's learning as it's helping. It's kind of like a personal assistant that you're training to be your assistant.
And that's, of course, one of the scary things for people, because it feels somehow weirdly invasive, Well, this reminds me that just before we went on air today, one of our staff members was saying they were using ChatGPT to do something and ask some questions, and I think some professional thing. And the AI, generative AI assistant or whatever, said, "Would you like me to write a prayer for you?"
Yep.
Which took that person aback, and they're like, "What?"
It shows they know that person, and that person would like something like that.
Right, to that point, right? And so they didn't say, "I'll pray for you," which would have been weirder.
Yeah.
That would have been even odder, right? But they said, "Well, we'll write a prayer for you," and it's like, and then I think the person actually, the CCS employee actually said, "Well, go ahead."
Yeah.
And they did write it, and I forget, I forget what she said about it. I think it was.
Was it a good one?
I don't know. I think it was like odd or something.
Oh.
But so that's a great example, right? So the AI can access all the great Christian minds of history, and can access all of the heretical minds of Christian history.
Yeah.
And the question is, and this is one of the big things I think, is the user has to be able to discern which is which.
Right.
And that's where it gets tricky, right?
Right.
Because
Whether
if you
to
don't have
trust
the
this
knowledge
tool.
set,
Yeah.
it's really hard, really hard to do that. ACSI, our accreditation organization, does a lot of research, and I get their publication called Research in Brief. The one for spring 2025 talks about AI and talks about the use of chatbots to help struggling writers. And I don't know if you've come across that in any of your educational explorations specifically.
Yeah, the
that
chatbots it's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
It is. Yeah.
So I know what ACSI said about their research, but did you have any? Does it work well? I mean, what do you think?
What's a chatbot?
So
Oh, there we go. What's a
you
chatbot?
can think of ChatGPT as a chatbot.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just basically like with the Magic School, stuff that we're testing. They have a chatbot called Raina, and it's like a cartoon, little character that you ask questions to. It's not animated. It's not a full speaking character. It's just this little cartoon icon, and you ask it questions just like you would ChatGPT. The difference is because it's for schools, it's not taking your data and then it's not taking student data and then learning from it. It's more of a whatever you ask it, it's gonna tell you type of thing. But all the chatbots, like they can have you can go to ChatGPT and create a character, say in the style of such and such. Tell me how you would do this.
Sure.
I told you guys a story about my friend that had a birthday recently, and he was a big fan of G.K. Chesterton, the Christian author. And so my other friend basically created a letter from G.K. Chesterton to him as a birthday present. And he even used a voice recording to kind of mimic the speech of it, and kind of read the letter out loud. And it was really a fantastic thing. And it basically, he just went to an AI and said, based on the works of this author, pretend you're this person, here's what his voice sounds like, write a really heartfelt letter, and it was really neat. It was very, very cool. So you can use those different personalities to, like as I was telling you about the Great Gatsby story, like you could, if you have a chatbot as one of the characters of a book you're studying right now, you can learn a lot about the book from that character, maybe things you missed when you read the book.
Yeah.
But you can learn a lot from it.
And as far as back to the struggling writers, how does they benefit? Again, the instruction probably can be adjusted.
Yes.
To be able to help them learn how to write better with specific suggestions. What ACSI found, not surprisingly, is that there are some students for whom that worked great, and then for some students didn't work at all, which was pretty much true of every methodology that exists.
It seems like you would start to rely on that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because that's one of the challenges, I think, with this. And I'm going to get to that. I do want to get to that, but what they found was that the larger issue, kind of the long view of the problem or the challenge, is that you can get bias within those large language models because of the way they're being programmed. We talked about that. Proliferation of misinformation. So again, because we can't discern what's accurate, what's not accurate, what's good, what's bad, then we can easily, even more than now, be easily misled. And then sometimes there are source areas. And then the big one that I think a lot of people really struggle with is privacy risks. What in the world does all this mean what does this mean to someone who is concerned? Like, for example, I've written a lot of things and probably are somewhere on the internet, right? And so I wrote a prospectus in 2015 called Humanizing Education. It's out there somewhere. Is it okay that this device will find it, analyze it, and use it in order to construct another piece that's in my voice? Now, on one hand, that's great, because it saves me having to redo something or do something new. But in a larger sense, if I make my living off writing, then what does that mean? What's it going to do with intellectual property? I mean, that's a tough one.
It is a tough one.
I mean, I don't know the answer to that. Honestly, I have no idea what the answer is to that. But I know that people make their living from intellectual property. This is pretty disruptive. Even now, that's true, though. Same with music can be the same thing, right? Because I think you can program AI to create songs in the style of certain artists.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, I've seen it.
It's interesting, man. I mean,
It's not very good yet,
It's
but
not.
it's getting better.
Yeah.
and that's why, for me, talking about quality is not even something I discuss in this, because just like the video we saw with the motions, the gestures being off with the words, it's gonna fix.
It's gonna get better.
It'll get better.
Yeah.
So the quality is not so much what I'm mainly kind of concerned about, but I am concerned about the issue of, with young learners, are we somehow degrading their ability to think well by giving them these tools, if we were to give them these tools too soon? An adult teacher using this to help shape their lesson plans, when they know how to make lesson plans, they understand what's going on, is one thing in a professional sense. It's another thing for a 9th grader to be writing a paper and not having to actually generate 4 different drafts of that paper by themselves. And your exposure to kind of the K-12 discussions, is that a common concern that people have?
It is. Cheating is one of the concerns that teachers have a lot, parents have a lot.
Right.
One of the, when I went to the conference in January, one of the things they talked about a lot was structuring if you're a teacher, structuring your lessons so that the grade does not depend on the amount of content they generate. Like using AI wisely in a way that still requires the student to do all the work, but and so they can't making it so that they can't just use AI to generate all the answers. They need to show understanding of a topic. They can use AI to study for it, and then not necessarily having everything just papers they turn in to prove they understand things.
Sure.
That's kind of the old way of doing it. With an AI tool now, that kind of isn't as helpful anymore.
Kind of more like in-class evaluation type stuff.
Yes.
Is what you're talking about.
Different ways of showing that the student understands the topic, and discussions with the student.
Yeah.
And one of the things that because there's anti-cheating AIs that's supposed to look at the work and try and figure out if it was generated by AI or not. Those don't work very well yet. So
Right.
there's a lot of false positives. People get flagged with their work being generated by AI when it wasn't, or vice versa.
Sure.
But what is the big deal is the teacher knowing that student, knowing how that student writes,
Right.
knowing
Yeah.
how that student would structure a paper. That you can tell immediately. Like teachers can tell quite often when this is something that doesn't sound like the student at all, then there's area for concern. If this sounds exactly like the student, then you don't have to worry about that.
You don't have to worry about that.
Right.
This is interesting. This just came to me. This reminds me of, like, methodologically as a teacher, as an educator. Back in the day, back in the British system, they used to use what they called tutorials. And they were different than what we think of as tutoring now. But they were basically, you'd get this relatively small group of students, and you would read whatever the book was, or write something or whatever. And the point of it was, you would get together and you would do exactly what you just said. That's why it reminded me. It's like you would sit there and you would talk about it.
Yeah.
Unpack it, search for understandings, make connections, use discernment, and all those kind of things. And it occurred to me that it's almost like, maybe in an optimistic sense, maybe this will actually move education back towards what in the end was a great way to learn. By anybody's estimation. There's a lot of critics of that system. Was it equitable across the board for all demographics? There's a lot of good questions about that. But fundamentally, as a teacher, I've been doing this for 40-some years. I've never found a better way to get people to master something or gain understanding than having that kind of relationship within the classroom, knowing the students and actually unpacking those things. So that's maybe an optimistic way to look at it, but I think that could be really good. What are some of, maybe for you, some of the other things that when you look at the horizon with AI, generative AI, it's like, that's going to be challenging, maybe we haven't talked about yet?
One of the things that's a concern is like the isolation of the student. If a student really starts using AI a lot and starts using it for all types of things, they interact more with software than they do with their teacher.
Yes.
Then they might feel more isolated. Might feel more lonely. So there's some concerns there. I know that one student that I talked to when talking about AI, they said that they've actually used ChatGPT as a kind of a therapist. When they were up late at night, they were not feeling very, very good. They were worried about some things. They were asking ChatGPT for for advice. For, you know,
Yeah.
I feel this is the way I feel. What should I do?
Yeah.
And they said it was helpful, even knowing that this was just a software program
Right.
designed to respond in ways that would
Right.
be helpful. They said it was still helpful, but that like depending on that is not a good thing. I
Yeah,
don't
that's
think.
the tricky part, right? I mean,
Right.
again, you're thinking about it as a parent, right?
Yeah.
And your child is maybe that person.
Yeah.
They're in their bedroom, they're doing whatever. How does it make you feel? I mean, what do you think about that?
It makes me uncomfortable.
Okay.
You know, I wouldn't want my child to be depending on that, but you know, I think we have to continue the conversation with them because they're going to continue to get more and more comfortable with this.
Yeah. More than
Whatever
we
this
will.
is, yeah, more
For
than
sure,
we will.
right? Yeah.
And so I think there are going to be what I would consider boundaries crossed like that.
Yeah.
To where, you know, I think we have to have those conversations with our kids.
Yeah. Yeah, because it is. I mean, you know, speaking of the word boundaries, I mean, it is a lot of it is really about boundaries, right? Because, and that's where again, I keep circling back. We talked about this before we went on air, but I circle back to this issue of wisdom. And if you take a generation of young people who perhaps have not really developed the wisdom that comes with time and with age and all those kind of things, hopefully, it's not a guarantee, and then put them in a position where they have to do this. They have to discern, they have to exercise judgment. And it's just like, gosh, are we kind of setting them up in a way for a lot of successes, but also a lot of failures?
Right.
And as somebody who's dedicated my life to trying to help kids, that is one of my central concerns. At the end of the day, are we putting these kids in a position where they just don't have the tools to actually deal with it? Which of course, then as an educator, I'm like, well then we got to give them the tools. How can we help them get the tools, and how can parents help them to get the tools?
Yeah.
And that kind of brings me to maybe as we start to begin to close, one of my takeaways from all this discussion is we really need to educate ourselves as adults.
Yeah, we can't shy away from learning all about this.
No, and it's a pain,
subject.
right? It's
Right.
another thing to have to do, and we don't
Yeah.
have time and all this kind of stuff. But as I'm sitting here and I've gone through this, and just in my role, I mean, I have to do a lot of learning and researching, and then with the podcast, and as Vance has. And you're a dad, and at the end of the day, it doesn't make sense to just have no clue as to how this all works and just say, this is awesome, or
Yeah.
this is horrible. And so we got to learn, and maybe that's something we can just touch on. It's like, where can people go to know more about this? And don't tell me generative AI. So maybe that's right? I don't know. Like, what kind of sources might be good, do you think, just in general?
I mean,
There's a ton.
There's a
right?
ton,
And that's,
yeah.
again, discernment to know which ones.
that is discernment, and I've read a lot about AI in preparation for all the stuff that we're doing this year. But I've used hundreds of sources.
Sure.
Yeah.
And there's certain authors, I think, in certain places that are pretty trusted for me. Like I've been in the Colson Fellows Program and the Colson Center. It's a very centered, biblically centered, balanced kind of approach. And they've done quite a few podcasts. So if our listeners or our watchers, our viewers, actually would go onto the Colson Center website, they'll find a lot of information, a lot of really good podcasts on this, unpacking a lot of the details.
We can link that in the show notes
Yeah,
as
that
well.
would be good, yeah. There's also a lot of other good people writing. John Lennox is a really, really smart guy, scientist who's written a lot about the future of AI. I think one of his books is, I think it's 2084. You know, it's like a predictive kind of thing, and it's just, it'd be interesting to throw that in a mix. So John Lennox is another one. I haven't read that book,
Okay.
disclaimer. Looks interesting though. So I think what we can provide with, it's kind of like with the emotional health, what we can provide as far as resources is good.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of squirrely things out there, you
Yeah.
know, too. So educating ourselves is very important. And I know from my side, I want to kind of end with this, and that is, I think we need to continue to study the Bible. I think we need to continue to understand, what is God saying? And when I think about things like Genesis 2 and this God breathing the breath of life into a human being, no offense to Virtual Vance, none intended, right? But there's no life that has been breathed into his nostrils. And what does
true.
all that even mean, right? And I'm not going to try to unpack that, but I mean, I think that's crucial. I think Genesis is crucial for identity, like we've talked about. It's crucial for so many things, purpose and meaning. And I think it's also crucial for discussions around life.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be alive and sentient and all those kind of things?
And I think that topic's going to be coming up more and more as this progresses.
There's no way it can, I don't think, right?
Yeah.
So that was kind of my last word. Do you guys have any final thoughts about this as like takeaways maybe for our listeners?
Yeah, Vance, I wanted to ask you a question. What do you think? Okay, so my approach is like to learn about AI is to actually do it. Like I'm on ChatGPT all the time, like experimenting and doing things so that I know, like, and it's because I'm interested in it for sure. It's not just for parenting purposes, but when my kids get on it, I'm not scared of them getting on it. You know, they can ask things, but they do know that it's not real. It's not
Right.
It's not alive. But what do you think about that approach, like just experiential learning, and then?
I mean, that's the way you learn something is by doing, and that's how I learned how to use AI was just get in there and start using it. I don't write very well, and so you know, I feel like my writing is very simple, very plain.
Yeah.
So if I need to write something professional, I will often say, I will write what I want to say and then drop that in there and say, can you make this a bit more professional or just structure this better? And it'll spit some things out and like, I don't really like that. And then you tell it, I don't really like that.
Yeah.
Try it this way. And you just keep telling it. You speak to it as if it were an assistant sitting next to you.
Right.
One of the most profound things that I keep seeing people talk about when talking about AI is treat it as a person that's sitting next to you that you're having a conversation with. Don't just say, you know, short sentences, like use full sentences, like actually speak to, you know, through your writing, speak to it as if it were a person so that it can understand you better. And that actually makes it easier to use, to just pretend it's a person and speak to it.
Right.
That's the easiest way to get the answers that you're looking for. But be careful because it doesn't have facts. It's not as good with facts as it is with pretending to be a person.
Yeah.
So you know, the words may be great, but check the data behind it just to make sure that you know you're getting valid information.
And that's what's hard with kids, you know, because like, you know, once you get it, it's pragmatic, right? It's simple, it's pragmatic, and I'm not going to check it.
Exactly.
Forget that.
Yeah.
I'm doing this to save time, right?
Right.
So there you go.
Yeah.
So any final words from like a parent perspective, you know, just any, like if you were talking to parents that were here, you said a little bit, what would you say to them?
Just be careful as you proceed forward. I think, you know, just know that, like you said, it's not always accurate, and kids embrace technology, I think, more than we do, and they seem to trust it more than we do. I know my kids do anyway. They're like, why are you questioning this, Mom?
Right.
But yeah, you know, you need to question everything that it gives you.
And I would just add one quick thing to that, and that is, we touched on this, but watch for emotional dependence.
Yeah.
That's a very, very, and that would be true not just with generative AI, but a lot of things, right?
Because when we say speak to it like it's a person, you know, our kids could hear that differently, I think.
Yes, that's right.
You
That's
know,
a great
and
point, right? Yeah, and to try to keep reminding yourself, but it isn't a person.
It's
but
a
speak to it like
tool.
it's a tool. Yeah, it can get very confusing.
Yeah,
so
I would think.
I think what I have managed to do today in this conversation is to further cloud all of the issues surrounding generative AI, which was not my intention. But I guess in summary, just final summary would be to say, there are some great things about this technology. It's not going to go away.
Right.
In fact, by the way, sidebar, every business owner I have talked to over the last month about this issue has said, this is a required skill set for almost every job of the people I talk to.
Wow. Already.
So you can, you cannot just go, oh, well, no big deal. And then we have to exercise as adults, we have to exercise great wisdom and great discernment in understanding how to help young people, each other, use it well, because it's not going to go away. It does have great capacities for good, but it also has great capacities for evil. Just like human beings in a way, you know, and so differently, but in a similar kind of way. Well, Thank you guys so much for joining us today. It was a lot going on today, so thank you for hanging with us.
And thank you, Vance.
And thank you, Vance, and your counterpart,
Virtually.
whoever that might be. We appreciate all that. And remember, if you forget everything else we said, and maybe especially poignant for this particular episode, remember that Jesus Christ is Lord. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Gospel Centered Education Podcast, brought to you by Community Christian School in Tallahassee, Florida. You can find us online at myccs.org.